Our story begins with a very close neighbor who always took advantage of the moments his parents were away to take him to her room to play. One time, when he went to her house, she was holding a pink jar and her face appeared slightly flushed. She seemed a bit strange, and to distract him, she prepared a table overflowing with delicious dishes. He ate until he was full, but for some reason, perhaps it was the meal, he suddenly felt very sleepy. When he finally woke up, he felt incredibly weak, almost as if he had wet the bed. And then his sister vanished. He had no idea where she went, at least not until the day he turned 18. That was when he saw that neighbor again, the one who had always been so fond of him since he was a young boy. He had just returned from school when he looked up and saw that dark house sitting right there on the corner. We see that the front door was standing slightly ajar, allowing a faint, dim light to escape into the night. His heart began to race and his legs felt weak, though on the outside, he managed to remain perfectly calm. He slowly climbed the stairs, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. He forgot to knock, forgot the risk of trespassing, and forgot that they were just neighbors who hadn't met in years. He entered without permission, his heart full of hope as he searched for that familiar figure. The aroma of fresh food floated through the air, and the house was impeccably clean. "Oh, the little glutton has followed his nose here," Lin Bankin said as she turned around. Her red lips curved into an enchanting smile, making her beautiful beyond anything he could have imagined. "It has been so long," she said, while his blurry memories slowly became sharp, overlapping with the woman standing before him. She was still just as sweet, just as elegant, and just as charming as he remembered. "It really has been a very, very long time, Sister Bankin," he managed to say. She teased him, asking if she had gone foolish, because her beauty had left young Chunyu completely spellbound. Lin Bankin gazed at him and his shy expression, as if she were seeing that same little boy who used to follow her everywhere. He stammered that it wasn't that, struggling to find the words to tell Sister Bankin just how beautiful she truly was. To be honest, he was incredibly nervous. After so much time apart, bursting into her home like this felt quite bold. He still wasn't entirely sure how he should behave around this woman who was like a sister, yet not related by blood. She remained as lovely as ever, her smiles and gestures carrying a mature charm that made her look like a recent university graduate. In the very flower of her youth, he recalled that she was only 5 years older than himself. She told him not to worry about it anymore and asked if he had eaten dinner yet. She invited him to join her, mentioning that the meal was almost ready, a perfectly timed coincidence, of course. He admitted he hadn't eaten, explaining that he usually just relied on takeout from his job. He responded with a slight stutter, but seeing the many dishes she had prepared, he realized it would be a waste not to stay. And so, he pulled out a chair and sat down, setting his takeout container aside for the moment. The table was already filled with various dishes, a colorful spread of meats and fresh vegetables. It had been a long time since he had eaten such a hearty, abundant meal, far from his usual boring routine. She encouraged him to dig in, wanting to see if her cooking skills had declined over the years. Lin Banshin served him a bowl of white rice and placed it gently in front of him. He picked up his chopsticks and took a bite. The savory, salty flavor he had nearly forgotten instantly awakened his appetite. It was clear that Lin Banshin's culinary skills were still as excellent as they had always been. He told her it was delicious, noting that Sister Banshin still cooked as wonderfully as he remembered. She smiled, saying she was glad Chinyu liked it, before removing her apron and sitting down across from him. We see the warm, yellowish light casting soft shadows against the white wall as they shared their meal. Her beautiful face wore a warm smile, the kind that makes you feel instantly at home. It was enough to make anyone lower their guard, as she ate with small, elegant, and refined bites, her gaze fixed on him. Seeing that he was truly hungry, yet still too shy to let loose, Lin Banshin chose to say nothing for the moment. She waited in silence for the boy to finish his bowl of rice, and then asked with a smile if he was full. She offered him another serving, and though his stomach was far from satisfied, his tension and pride made him refuse. He politely declined, claiming he was already full, which, to be honest, was a bit of a stretch. Lin Banshin noticed his indecision and melancholy, so she simply took the bowl from him and said she would serve him more. She mentioned she had cooked a bit too much rice, and it would be a real shame to let it go to waste. He thanked her softly as she placed the fresh bowl in front of him, watching as he sat there with his head bowed. His movements were careful, like a child entering an adult's house, striving to show every bit of manners he knew. Lin Banshin softened her voice even further, making it warmer and more familiar as she called out his name, Chunyu. He looked up, slightly dazed, only to meet her smiling eyes looking down at him with such kindness. She then asked him a simple question. What had he called her just a moment ago? Not quite understanding the point of the question, he answered a bit numbly, calling her Sister Banshin. She had changed quite a bit, but deep down, she was still that same caring sister, guiding him with such sweetness. She noted how obedient he was being and sat back down, satisfied with his answer. The young man finally cast aside his shyness and began to devour the food in large bites, as if he were starving. It had clearly been a long time since he'd had a proper meal, and Lin Banshin watched him closely under the warm light. He was handsome and lean, with a gentle expression in his eyes and skin as smooth as white jade. The familiar scent deeply engraved in his memory hadn't changed at all. It was still her, through and through. He finished his second bowl, but his stomach, which had been empty since school let out, was still far from satisfied. The colorful and appetizing dishes remaining on the table continued to tempt his palate in the most cruel way. We see him glance at Lin Banqin, who was already reaching out her hand to take his bowl once more. With words carefully chosen to protect his fragile self-esteem, she told him to have just one more serving. She insisted there was plenty left, and as she took the bowl, he instinctively reached out to retrieve it. He told her he could serve himself and that there was really no need for her to trouble herself. But she simply smiled, asking if it wasn't his sister who used to serve him in the old days. He stammered out a soft thank you to Sister Banqin, his defenses melting away under her gaze. He requested only half a bowl, claiming he was almost full, which, as we know, was a bit of a white lie. Lin Banqin looked down at the half portion of rice in the bowl, seemingly understanding his hesitation. She herself had barely eaten a few bites and hadn't even touched the vegetables on the table yet. He thanked her again, noticing how the grains of rice remained delicate, soft, and perfectly white. She then claimed she couldn't eat another bite and insisted he take her own plate for himself. She pushed her plate toward him, and he stared at the rice. It was pristine and untouched. It was a sharp contrast to his own plate, which was already messy and covered in grease stains. To be honest, this gesture felt like it was crossing a boundary that shouldn't be crossed so easily. He turned the thought over in his mind several times, but he couldn't quite make sense of his feelings. It wasn't that he was worried about hygiene. That was the least of his concerns in that moment. What truly disturbed him was a sudden, overwhelming shyness, as if they were sharing an indirect kiss. It was that peculiar, heightened sensitivity that only exists in the mind of a young and immature boy. He tried to recall those distant times, though he no longer held any clear or distinct memories of them. He couldn't remember much, but he was certain that back then, he and Sister Banqin had been incredibly close. She had always been so kind to him, treating him with the same warmth as if he were her own younger brother. He was sure that in those days, he never harbored any strange or complicated thoughts toward Lin Banqin. To his younger self, she was simply a sister who was both beautiful and incredibly sweet. She seemed to know everything and cooked so well. Quite simply, he liked her very much. It was a simple, pure affection, completely free of any ulterior motives or deeper meanings. However, as he approached his 18th birthday, he had shed much of that childhood innocence and stood on the doorstep of adulthood. He was now acutely aware of the differences between men and women and the notion that one must maintain a certain distance. We see that he barely ate a bite, while Lin Banqin sat quietly, observing the young man's hesitation. His expression was one of pure bewilderment, and he found himself unable to even move his chopsticks. She seemed to realize then that the boy inside him had finally grown up. He now understood how to keep a proper distance from the opposite sex and was no longer the obedient child he once was. She wondered for a moment, could it be that Xinyu had grown to look down on his sister? Perhaps he was hiding his true feelings, yet she continued to smile at him with that same characteristic sweetness. Her voice dropped to a playful, low tone as she teased that if he didn't obey, she would have to teach him a lesson again. Panicked, he quickly tried to explain that it wasn't like that at all. That wasn't what he meant. He took the plate and began to gulp down the food. The rice was, objectively speaking, exactly the same as before. There was no real difference in the flavor, yet the psychological effect continued to interfere, echoing over and over in his mind. The thought remained. This was the very same plate Sister Banqin had been eating from just a moment ago. In the end, he finished every last grain of rice, looking between the remaining food on the table and the empty plates sitting before him and Lin Banqin. "I'm full now," he said, trying to regain his composure. "I'll go ahead and do the dishes." "There's no rush for that just yet," Lin Banqin replied with a smile, her gaze still fixed on him exactly as it had been before. She suggested they chat for a while, noting how much Xinyu had grown and how she, Sister Banqin, had only become more beautiful. And that was the truth. In his memories, Lin Banqin had always been roughly the same age he was right now. She had been like the prettiest girl in class, sweet, delicate, and possessing all the charm of a young maiden. But back then, she lacked this current serenity and the quiet, mature elegance that now defined her as a woman. She leaned in slightly and asked, "So, has Xinyu ever thought about his sister?" "Of course," he admitted, recalling how sad he had been for a long time after Sister Banqin left without saying goodbye. "I see. I'm sorry about that," she murmured, tilting her long, slender neck in a gesture of regret. We see her silky, smooth hair fall gracefully over her shoulders as she looks down. She explained that her father had passed away back then, and her family had called her away suddenly to handle the funeral arrangements. Hearing this, Xinyu felt a sharp pang of guilt in his heart and quietly offered his own apologies. "You don't have to apologize," she said softly. "None of that was your fault, Xinyu." Lin Banqin reached out to stroke his head. She clearly still adored his docile nature, or perhaps that's just how she felt things should be. He then asked her how things were going at her home these days. She told him that things were better now, and that finally, there was no one left to control her life. "And what about you, Xinyu?" she asked. "Why don't I see your uncle around?" He lowered his head, his eyes downcast as his voice dropped to a whisper, explaining that his father had passed away a few years ago. In truth, he had moved past the pain long ago, having grown accustomed to living without the protection of his elders. But seeing Lin Banshin again brought the entire past rushing back, and Sister Banshin once more wore that indulgent smile she reserved for her elders. We learn that Chunyu is currently in his final year of high school, with graduation coming up next year. Is there any girl at school you like? She teased. You're so handsome. I'm sure you're surrounded by many pretty girls. He quickly shook his head, explaining that he only had 2 or 3 friends he actually spoke to. Not even one girl you like? Lin Banshin asked, tilting her head curiously. Her fine eyelashes fluttered as her eyes overflowed with smiles, though her playful words hit a certain sharp edge. In reality, the first thing that came to his mind was her, which, to be honest, was a dangerous thought. He had no idea why she had suddenly appeared in his mind like that. It was overwhelming. Perhaps he really had fallen for her, even if he had been denying it all this time. Deep down, he didn't dare to admit it, let alone try to get close to her. No, it's not like that, he stammered, though his lack of confidence was plain for anyone to see. Chinyu, are you thinking about a girl right now? She pressed. He continued to deny it, though he was painfully aware that his lies were full of holes. We see him grip a corner of the fabric, his palms damp with nervous sweat. All right, your sister believes you, Chinyu, she said, letting him off the hook for now. She reminded him that with university entrance exams next year, he really should be focusing on his studies. Lin Banshin gathered the dishes and stood up. When she saw him move to help, she waved her hand for him to stay put. Let me handle this, she insisted, noting that between school and work, he must be exhausted. She told him to go and get some rest early, and this time, he didn't try to argue. Feeling a bit embarrassed, he simply took the plastic bag and prepared to head off. I'll be going then, he said. If you need anything, Sister Banshin, you can just call me from next door. I will, she replied, already busy placing the dishes into the water. A moment later, she heard the sound of the door closing behind him. The smile on her face vanished instantly, replaced by a coldness that seemed to pierce the very air. By 9:53, we find Chunyu sitting quietly on the edge of his bed. Outside, the cold night wind beat rhythmically against the window pane. Scattered city lights flickered in his eyes as he lost himself in thought. With the air conditioning broken, the room felt unusually chilly that night. Meeting Lin Banshin again had been completely unexpected, a total surprise, to be honest. It felt as though fate had orchestrated this moment, just as he was about to come of age and graduate. He remembered how she had left without a word, a departure he had deeply regretted for a long time. Back then, he hadn't even had the chance to thank her for her kindness and tenderness. Fortunately, she was back now, and he felt he finally had a chance to make up for that old regret. Suddenly, a soft knock on the door reached his ears, breaking the silence. He left his room and opened the door to find Lin Banshin standing there, holding a bundle of clothes. She smiled at him with a warmth like a spring breeze and explained that the water had been cut off at her place. She jokingly asked if he was being forced to stay awake, then wondered if she could use his bathroom and stay the night. Of course, Sister Banshin, he replied quickly. You can sleep in my room. We see him step aside, clearing a path for Lin Banshin to enter the apartment. Thank you, Chinyu, she said softly. Sorry for the trouble. It's no problem at all, really. The bathroom is just over there. We see him point toward the glass door on the wall, noting that Lin Banshin had brought only her clothes. The shampoo and shower gel are right there on the windowsill, nothing else to worry about. He promised to bring her a fresh towel, which she accepted with a quiet, appreciative nod. Lin Banshin stepped into the bathroom, taking a moment to survey the cramped little space. In the dim light, everything felt a bit crowded and piled together, a typical bachelor's setup, one might say. A cold draft still lingered in the air, though she held nothing else in her hands but her change of clothes. Chinyu asked if she was ready for bed, explaining that he would be sleeping in his father's room. It was a bit of a mess, to be honest, so he'd need a moment to tidy things up for himself. He told her to get some rest as soon as she was finished with her shower. Since the washing machine was acting up, he suggested she just leave her laundry there for the time being. It was late, and she could always handle the laundry tomorrow. He handed her the towel and closed the frosted glass door. He reminded her once more to call out if she needed anything at all. He told her to leave her worn clothes outside, and she simply thanked him again. Chinyu bid her good night, assuring her once more that it was no trouble. Good night, she whispered back from behind the door. And here, we might wonder if there was a hidden motive behind this sudden visit. He looked at the room, questioning why it wasn't in a state of complete disarray. Deep down, he felt quite comfortable with the arrangement, even if he was sleeping in a bit of a forest of clutter. The quiet of the night finally began to settle, but things were about to take a turn for the strange. It was wild and quite uninteresting, really, but he had to tell the alien about the situation with the dogs. The air in the small space was suddenly filled with the faint, delicate scent of roses. He stepped toward the sink and noticed a small black garment and a pair of women's underwear in the plastic bin. The rest of the clothes were underneath, and feeling a deep blush creep up his neck, he quickly turned his head away. He soaked the towel once more, letting the cold, heavy fabric press against his face to cool his nerves. Once he had finally regained his composure, he made his way back into the bedroom. There stood Lin Banshin by the bed, holding his phone in her hand. She explained that the phone had rung several times, so she had simply answered it for him. It was a girl calling, Lin Banshin noted as she turned and handed the device back to him. "She has a very lovely voice," she remarked, adding that the girl was surely quite beautiful as well. The comment caught him off guard, exposing every hidden emotion he was trying to keep under control. He explained that she was a colleague and a friend who had helped him quite a lot. When asked if he liked her, Shinyu realized he had never actually felt that way about the girl. He answered naturally, as the thought of having that kind of relationship had truly never crossed his mind. Her family was well off, she was beautiful, and she had great grades, hardly someone who lived in the shadows like him. It wasn't even something he could imagine. Being friends was already the deepest connection they could have. That was his limit, or so he thought, just as Sister Banshin began to move much closer to him. She was slightly taller than him, and as he looked down, he caught a glimpse of her silhouette beneath the loose pajamas. Suddenly, she pulled him into an embrace, her arms wrapping around his neck as she leaned in close. She leaned against his chest, and once again, that familiar, seductive scent of roses drifted toward him. "Shinyu, your sister is very happy today," she whispered, leaving him feeling more than a little bewildered. We see her body pressed firmly against his, soft, warm, and far closer than he expected. It seemed she still viewed him as that same innocent child who understood nothing of the world. Her gestures, to be honest, showed absolutely no regard for personal space or boundaries. Perhaps it was simply the overwhelming emotion of reuniting after such a long time apart. He could understand that to a certain extent, but he felt he really ought to remind her of the present. "Sister Banshin, I'm already 17 now," he tried to say, choosing his words with great care. He attempted to gently pull away from her embrace, only to discover that he couldn't move at all. She held him tightly, trapping him as she apologized, saying she was still used to the Shinyu of the past. The old Shinyu, she reminded him, used to love it whenever she held him like this. "Just don't do this in front of others," he pleaded, adding that she was a young woman now. He worried it wasn't right for her reputation, but she just brushed it off, claiming she understood perfectly. She asked for just a little longer, pleading to hold him for a few more moments. Lin Banshin's voice sounded sweet and affectionate, the very picture of sisterly love. But in the shadows where he couldn't see, her eyes burned with a cold, undisguised stubbornness. The embrace lasted over a minute, leaving him quite stressed before she finally let go and left the room. That night, he slept soundly. The presence of another person seemed to chase away the silence of the empty house. The loneliness of countless nights had finally come to an end, at least for this evening. He fell into a peaceful sleep, dreaming of sunlight filtering through banana trees onto a pale, delicate face. We see his sister, dressed in a white cotton dress, playing with him and helping him with his homework. She would let him eat at her house, and as a small, naive boy, he accepted it without a second thought. Back then, being so young and ignorant, he truly didn't understand the differences between the sexes at all. He always loved following Sister Banshin around, his affection for her being something simple and entirely pure. In his eyes, she was far more beautiful than any of the girls he saw at school. He believed she knew everything, that she was, in her own way, completely omnipotent. We recall a time he fought with his father, standing defiantly before a man exhausted by his efforts for the family. He had flown into a rage, being quite as stubborn as a mule in that moment. After the scandal of their shouting match, he stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. He burst into Lin Banshin's home, and his father watched as he clung to her waist, his face clouded with frustration. He was just a small child then, naive and ignorant. He simply felt at home whenever he was at her side. It was his favorite thing, really, just to follow Sister Banshin wherever she went. His feelings for her were uncomplicated, rooted in a very innocent kind of love. To him, she was more radiant than any girl he had ever met. He believed she was perfect, but then the bedroom door creaked open and a slender figure slipped inside. She stood by the bed, watching him as he lay on his side, his breathing soft and peaceful in his sleep. She leaned over him, and that was when it all began. Vaguely, through the haze of sleep, he heard the relieved voice of a woman he knew so well. And in that moment, the warm morning sun began to pour in, casting beams of brilliant light across the room. He opened his eyes, feeling utterly dazed, and rubbed the sleep away as he scanned the quiet room. After a moment of confusion, the memories of the previous night finally began to return to him. We see him open the door to find the living room curtains already drawn wide. The streaming sunlight perfectly illuminated the pale, clean face of Lin Banshin. She was standing there, holding a simple bowl of rice porridge. She turned her head and smiled, explaining that she had just gone downstairs to buy some breakfast. She told him to eat while it was hot, though he still wasn't used to waking up to someone else's presence. He walked over in a daze and sat down as the lean meat porridge steamed on the table. He took a sip, and the fragrant, salty flavor immediately flooded his taste buds. To be honest, she had wanted to cook herself, but she felt the kitchen lacked any real flavor. Since there were no ingredients in the house, she promised to show Chinyu her culinary skills tomorrow. He told her there was no need to go to such trouble, as he was perfectly fine with anything. But Lin Banshin simply rested her face in her hand and stared at him intently. There was a hint of a reproach in her voice as she asked if he had even been eating well these past years. She noted how much weight he had lost, insisting that he needed a good meal every now and then. He avoided her gaze, feeling a sudden and heavy pang of guilt. In his memory, the times he had actually eaten a proper meal could be counted on one hand. Most of the time, he had simply found ways to get by, which was far from ideal, of course. She decided that since she was back, she would take it upon herself to look after Chun-Yu's nutrition. After all, as she reminded him, he used to come to her house to ask for food all the time. "All right, thank you, Sister Bankin," he replied, accepting her kindness with a small smile. She told him it was nothing as we see the bowl of white porridge quickly being emptied. Lin Bankin set her chopsticks aside and watched him finish the porridge before he moved on to 2 buns. She gathered the dishes and told him to go wash up first, insisting that she would handle the cleaning. She added that she would drive him to school afterward, earning another quiet thanks from Chun-Yu. He rose from the table and headed to the bathroom to start his morning routine. The cold water splashed against his face, and to be honest, it was exactly what he needed to wake up. He remembered how, years ago, Lin Bankin used to come over to his house just to help with the cooking. She had always offered him advice and treated him with the genuine care one shows a younger brother. After so many years apart, he hadn't expected her to still look after him with such warmth. A little later, we returned to the familiar scenery of the city streets as they approached the school. In front of the narrow school gates, students were arriving in small, chattering groups. The security guard, dressed in his police-style uniform, watched the morning rush from his small booth. But this time, the view through the transparent car window felt a bit different for our protagonist. He was now one of those students arriving in a private car of an expensive, unknown brand. Sitting there in the passenger seat, he couldn't help but feel a bit conspicuous and flashy. He knew nothing of Lin Bankin's past or her family, but it was clear she was doing very well for herself. That elegant and refined air of hers suggested she came from a family of significant wealth. "Well, I'm off. Goodbye, Sister Bankin," he said, preparing to face the school day. She promised to see him that evening as he opened the door, ignoring the subtle, curious stares of his classmates. After that, Chun-Yu hurried to the classroom, where he found that Su-Mu had arrived before him and was chatting with the girl at the desk in front. She remained as kind as ever, radiating a sense of calm that seemed to fill the room. Her beauty, it must be said, was of the understated and subtle variety. He set his backpack down and took his seat, trying his best to settle his nerves for the day ahead. As he glanced over the assignments due that day, the girl in front suddenly stopped mid-sentence and turned her sparkling eyes toward him. She looked at him with pure excitement and asked, Chun-Yu, who was that woman who dropped you off at school?" She wanted to know the brand of the car, but he simply explained she was a neighbor, like an older sister to him. This revelation immediately caught Su-Mu's attention as well. With a slightly surprised tone, he confirmed that she had lived across from his house back in elementary school. He explained that she had moved away but returned just yesterday, prompting Su-Mu to ask if they got along well. Su-Mu asked this in a quiet, steady voice, as if it were nothing more than a bit of casual morning gossip. He replied that they did, noting that she had always taken great care of him in the past. Suddenly, the school bell rang out loudly, cutting their conversation short amidst the chaotic rustle of turning pages. The air was soon filled with the confused drone of students reading aloud and trying to memorize their texts. He felt a sudden urge to write something down and began searching for the right words while holding his English book open to the vocabulary pages. Without meaning to, his gaze drifted over towards Su-Mu once again. Her book was lying open on the desk in front of her. She sat with her head bowed, softly murmuring the words to herself as she studied. We see her bright, silver earrings catching the light, with her hair neatly tucked back behind her ears. It revealed a beautiful profile, and though he had no experience with love, he felt a certain appropriate fondness for Su-Mu. Everything had been calm until the previous night, when the subject of his feelings resurfaced. Suddenly, he found himself in the eye of the storm, as emotions grew uncontrollably within him. He tried to deny his true feelings for Su-Mu, but an inner voice fiercely refuted him, forcing him to admit the truth while he desperately searched for excuses. He told himself it was only because she was beautiful and brilliant, yet that other voice asked why he didn't feel the same way about Lin Wanqing. Slowly, he stopped resisting. With a restless heart, he gazed at the girl's face until he finally calmed down, his lips moving unconsciously. The syllables that escaped his mouth formed her name, Su-Mu, and despite the loud drone of the classroom, she heard him and turned with a look of doubt. Her eyes were clear and bright, so he quickly looked away, hiding his face behind his textbook so she wouldn't notice his nervousness. About 20 minutes later, the recess bell rang. He leaned on his desk and hid his face in his arms, pretending not to hear his name being called. Then, a voice as clear as a wind chime called out, Chun-Yu. He looked up to find Su-Mu sitting before him, blinking her fine eyelashes. When he asked what was wrong, she simply said she was stepping out for a moment. A few minutes later, she returned to find him staring blankly at her empty seat. He didn't notice she was behind him until a soft, cool hand patted his shoulder, a sensation that was, to be honest, quite pleasant. He stood up to let her back into her seat, trying to steady his racing heart while maintaining a somewhat forced expression on his face. Su-Mu set down her water glass, glanced at him, and asked if he was feeling down or if he simply hadn't slept well again. Unable to find a better excuse, he followed her lead, blaming his lack of sleep on his neighbor and deciding to nap during the long break. As Su-Mu noted that class was starting, she gently stroked his head, an intimate gesture that surprised him and reminded him of Lin Wanqing. and yet, the feeling was completely different. During the final period, which was usually reserved for independent study, someone nudged his elbow. He turned to see a math exam sliding onto his desk. Sumu pointed to a difficult problem and asked if he had any ideas on how to solve it. He recognized it as the day's homework, which he had already finished, so he agreed to explain the steps to her. Sumu leaned in close, their shoulders brushing as her slender fingers pressed against the paper, her gel pen accidentally leaving a small ink stain. He picked up a mechanical pencil and began to show her how to draw an auxiliary horizontal line, starting from point C. He continues sketching with the pencil, marking the lines with a steady hand as he explains the distance and the logic behind the exercise. Everything seems to be going perfectly. We follow the course of their study session, where he provides a clear structure for her to follow, using the same focus and application one might see in a professional setting. It was a scene that could have been part of a legend, two students lost in their own world of technical processes and shared focus, oblivious to the shifting mood around them. Suddenly, the final bell rings, and the room is filled with the sound of rustling bags and moving desks. He stops writing and looks at Sumu, only to find her already watching him. He suggests finishing the explanation first, noting that the hallways will be crowded anyway, so they continue proving that the line is perpendicular to the parallelogram. The explanation ends quickly and Sumu puts the exam away, her gaze brushing over his face as she notices his obvious discomfort. Then, a bold idea takes root in her mind. Just as he is about to pull his hand away, Sumu suddenly grabs it. Her palm is pale and delicate, with a slight coolness that leaves him completely stunned. He is left frozen, not knowing what to do as a deep blush spreads from his neck to his eyes. He stammers her name, asking what she's doing while trying to pull away. But she holds on with surprising strength, as if she were using all her might. Her skin feels soft against his, and she fixes her gaze on him like a hunter who has caught a prize. She points out that his skin is dry and cracked, then releases him, clearly satisfied with his reaction as she smiles mockingly at his bright red face before turning to her bag. After they pack their books, the two of them walk out behind the crowd of students. He still hasn't calmed down, and the sensation of her touch lingers on his hand. It leaves him feeling a strange sense of nostalgia as Sumu walks right beside him. That hand, which had just held him so firmly, now hangs empty at her side. She is so close to him that he could reach out and touch her, but as they reach the school entrance, he spots a familiar black car parked in an empty space by the road. Standing by the car door is a woman whose outfit is elegant and whose figure is slender. Her face is young and beautiful, far more so than the students passing by. The only problem is that her large eyes are filled with a coldness as sharp as a knife. Lin Wanqing usually acts sweet and kind, pretending to be above petty calculations. But right now, having seen him from a distance accompanied by a very pretty girl, her mask slips. As he approaches her, she suddenly forces the coldness from her face. She asks in a soft voice if he's finished for the day and offers him a ride home, but he tells her it's not necessary and that she should go on ahead. He explains that he and Sumu still have to go to work. Lin Wanqing looks at Sumu and asks if they are in the same class and if they sit together. Sumu introduces herself, placing a heavy emphasis on the fact that they are desk mates, to which Lin Wanqing replies that Chunyu must be quite a handful. With a forced smile, Lin Wanqing tells Sumu that he's always been a bit clumsy and used to follow her everywhere, revealing a past that he would likely rather forget. Her words are dripping with intimacy as she tells him there's no need to mention those things, even if much time has passed, because these are beautiful memories between them. Lin Wanqing claims she will always remember them, acting more like a protective older sister than a biological one as she reaches out to pat his head in front of Sumu. Sumu asks if she has just graduated from university, to which Lin Wanqing replies with a smile that she did, and rushed back immediately out of concern for Chunyu. Laughter dances in her eyes as she remarks that Chunyu is so clumsy it would be terrible if someone deceived him, lingering on that last word as if it held a hidden meaning. Sumu interjects, noting that Chunyu has very little contact with girls and mostly just talks to her, before asking Lin Wanqing how her own university life is going. She asks if she is happy and if she has a boyfriend by her side, a question that seems simple enough on the surface. Lin Wanqing chuckles and admits she doesn't have one yet, claiming she has always been too busy looking out for Chunyu. She wonders aloud how she could possibly have time to find a boyfriend, before turning her gaze back towards Sumu with a curious look. She asks if there really isn't any girl he likes at school, trying to probe for information. She pushes further, asking Sumu if she knows anything and if she can tell her big sister the truth about his love life. Sumu shakes her head with an air of docility, looking perfectly innocent and harmless as she claims she isn't quite sure. She adds that she hasn't seen Chunyu have much contact with any girls other than herself, which is a rather pointed observation. It seems Chunyu is still as clumsy as ever and perhaps doesn't like anyone yet, or so it would appear to an outsider. Lin Wanqing notes that he should be focusing on his studies anyway, especially since the university entrance exams are drawing near. She insists his mind should be on his books, and just as she reaches out to touch his head again, something unexpected happens. Sumu suddenly takes his hand, her pale and delicate fingers gripping his with surprising firmness. She pulls him toward her, pointing out that they don't have much time and are going to be late for work if they don't hurry. She announces that they are leaving first and bids the older sister a polite goodbye. Lin Wanqing asks if they are in such a rush that she shouldn't perhaps give them a ride, her tone still maintaining that sweet facade. Sumu replies that it isn't necessary since the place is just ahead and they can walk, her gaze finally settling back on Chunyu. Let's go quickly, she urges him, noting that if they delay any longer, it wouldn't be good to lose their attendance bonus. He knows there is still time, of course, but he turns anyway and gives Lin Wanqing a polite wave of the hand. He tells her they are leaving first and bids her a final goodbye, calling her sister Wanqing as they depart. Lin Wanqing waves back, telling them she'll see them tonight, while her gaze lingers on the backs of Chunyu and Su Mu as they walk away. We see her long hair falling loosely over her neck as she stands there alone. Her expression shifts, revealing a coldness far more severe than anything we had seen from her before. Later that evening, it's time for dinner. He turns off the television and takes his place at the table as soon as he returns. Tonight's meal is just as abundant as usual, prepared with the same careful attention to detail. There is meat and vegetables, a rich, thick sauce, and white rice cooked to absolute perfection. Lin Wanqing serves a bowl and places it in front of him, sitting across the table while maintaining her usual elegant composure. Her cheeks carry a delicate, almost intoxicating flush as she watches him. The corners of her red lips curl into a soft smile while she observes him devouring the food. Whatever truly lies behind that look in her eyes remains discreetly hidden for now. She remarks that since he's eating so late, he must be absolutely starving. She pours a glass of water and slides it toward him with a practiced, graceful motion. She continues to watch him, seemingly amused by his messy, unrefined way of eating. He admits he is quite hungry and tells her how lucky he feels to be able to eat Sister Wanqing's cooking. He notes that it's even better than before, a compliment that causes a wide smile to spread across Lin Wanqing's face. She stands up and retrieves a bottle of red wine from the cabinet to accompany the meal. To be perfectly honest, he has never actually had a drink in his life. He reminds her that he is still a minor and, besides, alcohol has a way of clouding the mind. He admits he doesn't like it much, then asks if she knows why so many people still enjoy drinking. Lin Wanqing rests her face in her hand, watching him with an unreadable intensity. With the fingers of her other hand, she begins to tap the glass very gently. The rhythmic sound fills the silence as he admits he simply doesn't know the answer. She wonders aloud if it's for some kind of pleasure, all while reaching for the bottle. The wine begins to breathe as she slowly pours a small glass, the aroma drifting through the air. The liquid is pure and sweet, like a fallen drug, shimmering with an intense, deep color. She explains that alcohol can make people forget many things they would rather not remember. It washes away the worries, the pain, and the lingering sadness of the day. We see her swirl the glass, watching the wine flow smoothly against the crystal. She asks if he wants to try it, just as he finishes the last of the rice in his bowl. Still holding his chopsticks, he pauses as reason and curiosity battle within his mind. He watches as Lin Wanqing brings the glass closer, her pale fingers gripping the slender stem. The liquid inside is a deep, tempting red, catching the light in a way that is hard to ignore. He hesitates, suggesting that perhaps it isn't really necessary for him to try it. He is certain he can't handle his liquor, and getting drunk would be quite a problem. She tells him it doesn't matter, encouraging him to just relax and eat there with his sister. Lin Wanqing bites her deep red lips, her eyes exuding a charm that is as subtle as it is seductive. The bright light of the room illuminates her face, making her look almost impossibly beautiful. She is as seductive as a five-petaled rose in full bloom, radiating a quiet, dangerous charm. She tells Chunyu that he is being a bother to himself and that he shouldn't worry about a thing while he's with his sister. She encourages him to simply do as he pleases, modulating her voice until it sounds incredibly warm and inviting. Like an older sister teaching her little brother, she guides him with patience, slowly causing him to lower his guard. He is falling into a trap of ruin, though he doesn't know it yet, as she sets the glass down. She places it right in front of him on the table, and then Lin Wanqing pours herself another drink. Smelling the sweet aroma of the alcohol, wild desires begin to sprout within him, clouding his vision in an instant. He finally gives in, deciding to try it, and takes a small, cautious sip from the glass. The sweet liquid slides over his tongue and down his throat, flowing into his stomach and stimulating every sensitive nerve. She asks him how it is and if he likes it, to which he responds in a bit of a daze. He admits he can't quite understand the sensation. He only knows that it feels incredibly intense. It is as if a spark has been lit inside his head, while the aroma lingers stubbornly on the tip of his tongue. His reason begins to sink beyond his control as Lin Wanqing leans in and continues to refill his glass. The level of the liquid rises slowly, its vivid colors stirring and agitating his already clouded thoughts. He finds himself wanting to keep tasting it, his fingers hooking instinctively around the glass. He grips the glass tightly but doesn't lift it, feeling as though he is slowly losing consciousness. A voice inside tells him to only have a little, but his sister repeats that he has nothing to worry about. Lin Wanqing reaches out to caress his face, her soft, tender palm pressing gently against his skin. Her voice is soft, yet it carries a weight that seems to penetrate right through to his very bones. She promises Chun-Yu that she will take care of him, looking up to see nothing but total confusion in his eyes. The smile at the corners of her lips grew wider, becoming something far more predatory. She pinched his cheek playfully and exhaled a provocatively warm breath toward him. That breath, now heavily laced with the scent of alcohol, brushed dangerously close to his lips. Lin Wanqing returned to her seat, watching him drink as if he had completely lost his mind. She finally let out the greed and desire she could barely hide any longer. With the last of her patience, she leaned in and asked him in a soft, silk-like voice, "Chun-Yu, are you drunk? Would you like a little more?" Still feigning a kind appearance, she poured him another glass even as she asked. He insisted he wasn't drunk, telling Sister Wanqing that the wine was actually quite good. He responded in a dazed, drunken stupor as a deep flush spread across his pale skin. The spark inside his body had ignited into a great fire, burning through his weak defenses. Without knowing why, he tried to act strong and reached for the glass in front of him. That final drink shattered the very last vestige of his lucidity. The glass fell onto the table with a sharp clatter, spilling the rest of the liquid. It spread quickly across the surface, leaving a large, deep red stain in its wake. Lin Wanqing called his name twice, but she only received his faint, rhythmic breathing in response. He was leaning heavily against the table, his face completely flushed from the alcohol. He had lost consciousness entirely, which, to be honest, was exactly what she wanted. She picked up the glass, walked behind him, and pulled out a few napkins. Gently, she wiped away the wine stains lingering at the corners of his lips. Miromi rostro, juvenile y desalinado, pero con un toque de inocencia. Sonrio satisfeca, de verdad, con esa tolerancia al alcohol, on no había sentido nada. Me sentí como un bebé. CTE embaracaras así frente a otra mujer, no estaría bien. Su mano delgada pasó por debajo de mi axila. Me sostuvo y me puso de pie. Paso a paso me levo a la habitación. Lin Banshee me dejó caer en la cama. Se inclinó para admirar a la presa que acababa de capturar. Tantos años, aces sejas y ojos que la obsesionaban. On conservaban esos de tales familiars. Siguen haciéndola amar profundamente, diciendo poserme por completo. Su deseo de tener completamente controlada a la presa. Su mirada descendió lentamente, pasando por mi casa. Mi delgado cuello, mis finas clavículas. Me quito la chaqueta, metió la mano por debajo de la camiseta. Acariciando el calor de mi piel sin poder soltarlo. Al poco rato retiró la mano y me arropó con la manta. Se dio la vuelta y salió de la habitación para limpiar el desorden en la mesa. Pensó que la comida más preciada no debía comerse con prisa. Había que prepararlo todo. Al fin y al cabo, en ese momento yo lo pertenecía a ella, nadie podía arrebatármelo. Lin Banshee limpió la mesa, buscó una bata holgada y ese ducho. Cuando regresó, yo ya dormía pronto. Se pegó a mi cuerpo y me abrazó. La sensación de tenerme atrapado físicamente satisfizo enormemente su deseo. Como si hubiera encontrado un tesoro, más aún, en su corazón, yo siempre debía haber sido suyo. La última vez que dejó pasar la oportunidad, sufrió durante casi 10 años. Al reencontrarnos, el joven tenía a otras mujeres a su lado, incluso con una belleza no inferior a la suya. Lin Banshee nunca se había arrepentido tanto. Odiaba haber dejado escapar una oportunidad tan buena, dejando que el tesoro más valioso fuera tomado por él. Por otro, la obsesión la llevó a jurar con locura y ferocidad que recuperaría lo que le pertenecía. Inclinó ligeramente la cabeza y besó mi frente, mis mejillas, y finalmente se posó en mis labios. Ese dulce sabor mezclado con alcohol, acariciando suavemente mi rostro. Cuando Lin Banshee despertó, yo aún dormía profundamente en sus brazos, encallado, pareciendo dócil y pequeño. Mostrando sin defensa su figura más vulnerable, se alegra por mi suerte. Y se culpa en secreto por su engaño y maldad, pero decimos que el tiempo se detenga. Para poder abrazar para siempre a la persona que más ame en este momento. Al menos ahora lo pertenezco por completo, no es tarde, no es necesario arrebatar por la fuerza. Todavía hay oportunidad de avanzar con calma, piensa para sí misma, la queda total y voluntaria del joven. Eso es lo que ella quiere. Lin Banshee se levanta de la cama y me arropa bien. Se cambia a una ropa adecuada, entra a la cocina y se ocupa del desayuno. Cocina una olla de gachas de arroz rojo. Agrega dos platos de acompañamiento para las gachas, tiras de papa y tiras de taro. And she takes out some freshly prepared pickled radish to complete the meal. It was a simple but cozy breakfast, much like these years that seemed so peaceful. Our young man hadn't woken up yet. Obviously, he had been quite drunk the night before. Lin Banshee approaches the bed and leans down close to his face. She brushes away the loose strands of hair falling over his cheek and whispers softly in his ear, "Chun-Yu, it's time to get up." His consciousness slowly awakens, and opening his heavy, sleepy eyes, the first thing he sees is her leaning over him. There was Lin Banshin, calling him to wake up. The sunlight envelopes her face, and her gaze toward him is as if he were a complete disaster. The golden sunlight softly wraps around her face, and her gaze toward him is as if he were a complete disaster. The sunlight envelopes her face, and her gaze toward him is as if he were a total disaster. Chinyu must also take care of himself. Eat well and keep warm. Don't worry, he replies. He will do it. How obedient of him, really. Lin Banshin's eyes light up with a beautiful, satisfied smile. She finishes her porridge in small sips, waiting for him to finish his breakfast and wash up as well. After that, she drives him to school. Today is a bit later than usual, and when he reaches the classroom, more than half of his classmates are already there. He takes his seat. First, he passes his homework forward to the front of the row. Then he puts his backpack away and takes out his Chinese book for the morning reading. Naturally, his gaze drifts towards Sumo. She still has a somewhat sickly appearance, but her color looks much better than it did yesterday. Her beautiful profile is tinged with a healthy flush. She remains the most stunning plum blossom in the dead of winter. Why are you so late today? Sumo asks, lifting her book and speaking to him first. He thinks for a moment, having no intention of hiding the truth from her. I got drunk last night, he says with complete sincerity. His tone is calm. Without making much of it, he chooses to tell Sumu simply because of the trust between good friends. Sumu lowers her book and turns her face to look at him, appearing very interested in this revelation. Chinyu, do you drink alcohol? You drink? I've never seen you drink before, she remarks with surprise. I tried it yesterday. It turns out I have an incredibly low tolerance. I collapsed after only 3 glasses. I'm sure I caused Sister Banshin a lot of trouble, he adds, which was likely an understatement. You collapsed? Sumu murmurs under her breath, the words tasting bitter. The combination of those words fills her with a deep discontent, yet she finds no way to vent her frustration. She can clearly feel her heart boiling with a burning heat inside her chest. In her mind, she wants to grab him immediately and check his body for any mark left by that woman. What's wrong? Chinyu asks, noticing that Sumu seems a bit distracted. He waves a hand in front of her eyes, but she says nothing, turning her face away so her black hair hides her eyes. She is hiding a storm of ferocity and resentment, clenching her hand until her knuckles turn white. She can see Lin Banshin's greed now. It is the same possessive desire she feels, though she hadn't expected the other woman to be so aggressive. She feels the woman shamelessly lured him into a trap. How could Chinyu like her? How could he like that woman? Lin Banshin. Deep down, she is secretly at war with herself, all while watching him from the corner of her eye. We see her delicate profile, hiding a gaze filled with a hunger that is becoming increasingly difficult to conceal. To her, he is the treasure she desires most, the one she wants to hold firmly in her hands. She knows he won't declare his love voluntarily, even if those sincere, youthful feelings are buried deep inside him. His own sense of inferiority and the harsh weight of reality would always make him pull back. Sumu should have just kept waiting. After all, she assumed no one would ever take him away from her. But things are different now, and the situation is spiraling further out of her control with every passing moment. She can no longer afford to sit idly by while the house remains cold and empty over the weekend. Outside the window, the idle chatter of the neighborhood drifts in from the elderly residents living below. They usually gather under the shade of the great sycamore tree to gossip about anything and everything. That girl, I remember she seemed like such a good person, one of them remarks. Polite, with a fresh look about her, and it certainly seems like she has a soft spot for young Chinyu. If they were to become a couple, they would be quite a compatible match, wouldn't they? An old man, looking quite decrepit as he puffs on his pipe, chimes into the conversation. Don't talk nonsense, he scolds. Chinyu is still at an age where he should be focusing on his studies. In a few years, perhaps, another old man replies, though he wonders what the others actually know. That girl is clearly from a wealthy family, he points out with a knowing look. Why would she move to this rundown neighborhood unless she ran out of money? What was she thinking? In my honest opinion, Chinyu and a girl like her simply don't belong to the same social class. Oh, what do you even know about the young people of today? Another voice retorts. What era are we living in? The group of elders, wrapped in their thick coats, continue to argue without backing down. Sumu walked calmly past them, casting an indifferent glance their way as their words drifted into her ears. Her eyes, dark as ink, remained deep and tranquil, showing not even the slightest hint of being disturbed. She entered the building and climbed the dark staircase, stopping right in front of Chunyu's door to knock. When he opened the door, he breathed her name in surprise before politely stepping aside to let her in. She explained that doing homework alone was simply too boring, so she had come to find him instead. Besides, she had a few questions to discuss and offered to help him with his English as well. She smiled her usual smile, appearing kind and polite while carrying both a plastic bag and her backpack. He agreed, noting he was free anyway, and closed the door while feeling a sudden surge of joy inside. On such a monotonous and dull day, just being able to see the girl he liked was reason enough to be happy. To be honest, Somo's smile always had a way of making him feel better. He asked if she wanted to change her shoes, but she insisted it wasn't necessary. She told him to just go right in, heading straight into the living room herself. We see a small table by the window that hadn't been there before. Open books lay scattered upon it, while outside, the street remained frozen and still. He brought a chair to the table and cleared a bit of the cluttered space to make room for her. He had been working on some exercises, planning to finish his homework before doing anything else. Sumu admitted she hadn't finished hers either, setting her backpack down without much care. She placed the plastic bag she was carrying onto the table. By the way, she mentioned, these are just some tangerines she had recently bought. He thanked her, taking one to peel and eat, a small, sweet moment in an otherwise ordinary afternoon. The sweet juice burst from the pulp, flooding his palate with flavor. It was incredibly sweet, and Sumu smiled at him, clearly glad that he was enjoying it. Her smile, as tender as a flower, was no less sweet than the fruit, easily touching the heart of a young and inexperienced boy. He found himself staring at her until she told him, quite simply, that the rest were a gift for him. He thanked her and accepted the bag of tangerines she offered. He set them aside, pretending to focus on his homework, though his eyes remained restless and distracted. Suddenly, Sumo called out his name, and Shinyu looked up at her in confusion. She asked if it was true that Bankin lived right across the hall from him. He confirmed it, explaining that she often came over to help him cook and was very kind to him. Sumu remarked on how lucky he was, and he mused that perhaps it was just destiny's way of compensating him. He gave a bitter little laugh, knowing that Lin Bankin's care was, without a doubt, an unexpected source of warmth. Deep down, he felt immensely grateful to this older sister figure whose origins remained somewhat mysterious. Then Sumu asked if she counted too, causing him to stammer out a hesitant, "I suppose so." To be honest, he didn't know how to answer that properly, as Sumu was far too contradictory for him to understand. This was the very first time he had ever liked a girl this much. Yet he lacked the courage to confess. She saw him as a friend, even if she occasionally leaned in a bit too close. It made his heart race, and he often found himself imagining their future after the college entrance exams. He feared they might enter two different worlds, where their connection would slowly fade away without them even noticing. The mere thought of it made his chest ache, so he tried his best to suppress his feelings to avoid the pain. In his mind, both Sumu and Lin Bankin were perhaps destined to be nothing more than passersby in his life. He felt he didn't deserve either of them, and simply having them by his side during his youth was more than enough. As these thoughts drifted through his mind, his eyelids began to grow heavy, closing little by little. Suddenly, he regretted using that excuse about destiny's compensation. Because, to be honest, the gifts of destiny always seemed to come with an expiration date. Lin Bankin, Sumu, and this time together were beautiful, but he knew a farewell was waiting at the end. It was then that Sumo asked him directly if he would like her to stay by his side forever. She stopped writing and looked at him, posing the question with startling bluntness. Suddenly, she reached out and cupped his face, gently stroking his cheeks with her palms. The soft sensation made him tremble, leaving him wondering what had come over her. The gesture was far too intimate, and he froze completely, unable to understand her sudden change in behavior. He couldn't help but notice how smooth and delicate the skin of her hands felt against him. As she continued to caress his face, she forced him to meet her gaze, eyes as bright and fine as onyx. She called his name, Chinyu, and confessed that the thought of the time after the college entrance exams made her very sad. He found it hard to believe things wouldn't change, fearing that once university began, they would inevitably have to part ways. He wondered if Sumu was imagining that same distant future as well. A slight, deep shadow spread across Sumu's eyes as she pressed him for a real answer. She watched him with such gravity that, when a smile finally touched her lips, it carried an immense, sudden allure. She asked if he truly desired it, and regardless of whether it was possible, his heart screamed that he did. He admitted he wanted to be with them, but she corrected him. It wasn't about them, but about her. She told him she desired it too, as he was, after all, one of her very best friends. Sumu listens to his somewhat clumsy response, her expression unreadable. The desire in her heart begins to overflow, and a sudden impulse pushes her to reach toward his neck. She stands up abruptly, walks over to him, and simply strokes his eyes with a gentle touch. Confused, he lifts his head to look at her and asks what is wrong. That beautiful face is filled with a strange intensity, leaving him completely bewildered. In the very next moment, he instinctively tries to pull away from her touch. She calls his name, Chinyu, fixing her gaze on his eyes, pupils so clear they can be read at a glance. They reflect her figure perfectly, and she softly apologizes, admitting she got a bit carried away. That flash of madness in her eyes is forced back, hidden away once more. Sumu lets go, returns to her chair with an apologetic smile, and turns her head to continue reading. It was as if everything that had just happened was nothing more than an illusion. He remains perplexed, unable to make sense of any of it. Sumu's sudden change made it seem like she wanted to do something, yet that moment of intensity. It stopped at the very last second, and since he can't understand it, he decides to act as if nothing happened. A cold wind rattles the window, and outside, the sycamore trees have lost the last of their leaves. The cold, white light filters through the bare branches and the atmosphere in the room. Gradually, it becomes serene again, while Sumu secretly relaxes her tightly clenched fist. Several red nail marks stand out clearly against her pale palm, a striking sight, to be sure. And so, we reach the middle of the day, and he begins to pack away his books. He stands up and announces it's time for lunch, heading off to start the cooking. I haven't prepared many dishes, I'm sorry, he says, but she quickly asks why she shouldn't be the one to do it. Sumu lifts her head and blinks, her mind clearly already made up. He tells her that wouldn't be right, reminding her that she is, after all, the guest. How could he possibly let her cook? To him, it seems like a breach of hospitality. Sumu tilts her head and looks at him, asking how he could even think of such formalities. Shinyu remains silent for a few seconds before finally giving in and accepting her help. She assures him it's no trouble at all, suggesting she can even teach him a few things while they're at it. To be honest, she seems quite confident in her own culinary skills. Sumu stands up and enters the kitchen, where the sight of the ingredients scattered on the cutting board gives her an idea. She turns to Chunyu, who has followed her in, and asks him to start by chopping the chilies. While she prepares the oil, he takes the chilies, places them on the board, and begins to slice them. His movements with the knife are clumsy and unpracticed. It's quite obvious he's a complete beginner. Sumu sets down a bowl of dark sauce, and, seeing the uneven slices, approaches him with a small smile. Suddenly, she reaches out and takes his hand, telling him his grip on the knife isn't quite right. She points out that the chilies are being cut far too thick for the dish. She explains it should be done differently, advising him to go slower if he lacks the practice. She warns him not to cut his fingers, her hand resting there, a size smaller than his own. Her skin is fine and soft as it settles lightly against the back of his hand. It's clear her hand is too small to fully grasp his, yet she doesn't let go. Instead, she stubbornly insists on pressing down, guiding his hand as they cut the ingredients together. The sensation is truly indescribable, and Shinyu tells himself that Sumu simply hasn't noticed the distance, or lack thereof, between them. And so, without a single thought for personal space, she presses close to him and firmly grips his hand. When he lowers his head, he can catch the fresh fragrance drifting from the tips of her dark hair and her skin. As he lifts his hand, it feels as though he could almost embrace her while she focuses entirely on teaching him how to cut. But then, Sumu realizes Chunyu is distracted and calls out his name with a slightly complaining tone. She tells him to pay attention, sounding exasperated by the mess he's making. He offers a quick apology, and half an hour later, we see several finished dishes served on the table. Sumu has already served the rice, but she hasn't picked up her chopsticks yet. Instead, she just watches him as he takes a bite, a hint of tension in her eyes as she waits for his opinion. He admits it's delicious, honestly, far better than anything he could have cooked himself. She smiles, telling him she's simply glad that he liked it. She repeats how happy she is, that he enjoys the meal. It truly makes her happy that he likes it. She is just so glad it's to his taste. She really is happy that he likes it. It brings her joy to see him enjoying it. She is just so glad that he likes it. She truly is happy that he likes it. She is simply glad that he likes it. She tells him, once again, how glad she is that he likes it. She repeats how happy she is that it's to his taste. She simply keeps saying how glad she is that he enjoys the meal. Those words, spoken with such apparent indifference, snagged his heart like fishhooks, tempting him to confess his love right then and there. They sent his mind racing. He couldn't help but wonder if Sumu felt the same way about him. Shinyu, what kind of girls do you actually like? Sumo asked the question suddenly, maintaining that same calm, steady tone. It was as if they were just having a casual chat, and he admitted he didn't know, having never really thought about it. Then let me guess, she replied. She has to be beautiful, and... He interrupted, insisting she wouldn't need to be that beautiful, as he wasn't really that demanding. In that case, do I fit the bill? She asked, and he stole a quick glance at her. She was smiling broadly, looking as pure and lovely as she always did. When she laughed, she possessed a striking beauty, like a lily covered in morning dew at the break of dawn. It was enough to make him wonder all over again if her question carried some hidden meaning. Deep down, Sumo felt a flicker of shyness in her heart. She was feigning innocence, yet even she felt a bit affected by the moment. The conversation drifted off there, and as Sumu enjoyed the warmth and weight on her legs, she eventually noticed the sound of steady breathing. She looked down and saw that he had closed his eyes, appearing to have fallen fast asleep. She called his name softly a couple of times, but, perhaps unsurprisingly, she received no answer. His peaceful, relaxed sleep only served to frantically fan the flames of desire deep within her. She felt the tension rising as she fought with all her might to suppress an almost violent impulse. Slowly, inch by inch, she leaned in toward that soft cheek of his. Her lips finally brushed against him, and a wave of overwhelming passion crashed over her like a torrent. It submerged her completely, catalyzing that bittersweet and tender longing hidden in the depths of her heart. Inside her mind, Sumo cried out silently, pleading that if he liked her, he would just say it. She wondered why he didn't dare to speak, since she loved him and was certain he felt the same. She questioned if he knew how much she suffered holding back. Then, she rested her palm on his collarbone and moved it up his neck. Finally, she touched his face, trying to feel his presence as much as possible, craving even more physical contact. She couldn't understand what held him back, believing his love for her wasn't superficial, but etched into his very bones. It was a love that penetrated the soul, one that cherished everything about him, from his inner self to his physical form. At that moment, we see him startled awake by the sudden, heavy sound of the rain. Huge droplets lashed violently against the window, and he felt the soft leg still resting beneath his head. The tactile sensation was still vivid, and a second later, he realized exactly what kind of situation he was in. He sat up quickly, glancing at the clean fabric of Sumu's clothes and secretly hoping he hadn't drooled in his sleep. Looking back, he told himself he probably should have declined her offer from the very beginning. After all, there is a certain distance that should be maintained between men and women, or so they say. But this was Sumu, the girl he truly liked, and he accepted the situation with a touch of resignation. He figured it was better to let this moment be beautiful, even if it was fleeting. Deep down, he feared this secret love of his would likely never have a happy ending. He decided it was better to enjoy it now. Besides, Sumu's legs were truly comfortable. At that moment, we see that Sumu had also fallen fast asleep. She was reclining on the sofa, with strands of black hair clinging to her cheeks and falling toward the corners of her lips. This made her look even more adorable, and suddenly he felt a tickle in his heart, as if a light, ethereal feather had brushed against it. Without quite knowing why, he reached out his hand and slowly moved it towards Sumu's face. Her skin was soft and smooth, a wonderful texture that he couldn't resist pinching ever so gently. But in the very next instant, he realized he had gone a bit too far. In a hurry, he tried to pull his hand back, but she opened her eyes. She reached up and caught his hand while it was still resting against her face. Her expression showed surprise, but also a hint of playful mockery. Luckily, there was no anger. Like someone catching a mischievous child, she told Chunyu she hadn't expected him to be so bold. She teased him, asking if he really dared to touch a girl's face like that. She squeezed his hand tightly, as if she wanted to hold onto the evidence of his crime. It seemed she wouldn't let go until she had passed judgment on his behavior. He could only offer an apology, admitting he couldn't help himself because she looked so beautiful while sleeping. Suddenly, she changed the subject, mentioning that her leg had gone numb. Chunyu couldn't quite keep up with Sumu's pace, and it took him a moment to find an answer. He told her it was very soft and comfortable, though he knew that if it had been any other girl, he likely would have been slapped. He quickly hurried to apologize to her once again. But fortunately, she wasn't just any other girl. Sumu suddenly flashed a warm smile and finally let go of his hand. She turned her head and gazed out at the torrential rain falling outside the window. The heavy drops were falling rapidly through the air, under a sky as dark as if it had been stained with ink. Sumu walked toward the window, where transparent droplets were drumming against the glass. She rested her palm against the cold pane, watching the storm. In her clear eyes, we see the reflection of the rain falling in a chaotic, messy dance. Suddenly, she found herself silently wishing that the rain would fall even harder. She hoped it wouldn't stop, even if it meant flooding the entire world. As the sky grew darker, Chunyu turned on the light and remarked that the rain showed no sign of stopping. He asked her if, provided she didn't mind, she would like to stay the night there. She could take his room, he suggested, while he would sleep in his parents' room. He made sure to emphasize he had no ill intentions, maintaining a perfectly polite tone throughout. Deep down, he didn't want Sumu to think he had a hidden agenda. Her opinion of him mattered more than anything. She agreed, simply saying it was fine and apologizing for the inconvenience of staying. He told her he would go get her toiletries ready and headed into the bathroom. On the wall of cracked white tiles, 2 towels were hanging side by side. The blue one had been hanging there, perfectly clean, ever since he had given it to Lin Bankin that last time. It was still there, looking quite pristine, to be honest. He found a spare toothbrush, placed it on the windowsill, and returned to the living room. He asked if she would use the blue towel, noting that the toothbrush was brand new. As for the cup and the toothpaste, he told her she was welcome to share his. "Do you want to take a bath?" he asked, to which she replied, "Is it okay? Then, thank you." He explained that the shower gel and the shampoo were right there on the windowsill. The shower switch seemed to be broken, he warned her, so only hot water would come out. As for her clothes, she decided it was better not to change for the time being. "I can't exactly wear your clothes, can I?" she asked with a small smile. He had to admit she was right, feeling a bit embarrassed by the oversight. He told her he'd get her some slippers, turning to pull a pair of cloth ones from the rack. He placed them at Sumu's feet as she untied her sneakers, revealing a pair of white lace socks. Her slender ankles were exposed, her snow-white skin looking remarkably soft and delicate. She slipped her feet into the slippers and made her way into the bathroom. Soon, the sound of falling water echoed from inside, distinct from the rhythm of the rain outside. Those subtle sounds began to stir his imagination, making it hard for his mind not to wander. He gave his face a few quick slaps, trying to force those stray thoughts to stop. He pulled out his phone to distract himself with reading until, finally, the bathroom door opened. Sumu emerged still wearing the same clothes she had arrived in earlier that evening. However, the steam had tinted her snow-white skin and delicate face with a soft, warm flush. A few damp strands of hair clung to her, adding a certain touch of effortless grace to her look. He asked if she wanted to sit for a while, or if she would prefer to go straight to sleep. Pointing toward his bedroom door, he showed her where she would be staying for the night. She decided to head to bed, telling him he should probably go wash up soon as well. "Thanks for all the trouble today," she said, and with that, Sumu turned and entered his bedroom. He then went to the bathroom to wash up, where the steam had yet to dissipate, filling the air with a hazy white mist. A faint scent of Sumu lingered in the air, drifting softly around him as he moved. After finishing his shower, he changed into his slippers and made his way to the bedroom door. He knocked politely, and only after hearing a response did he turn the knob to open it. Sumu wasn't asleep yet. She was sitting at the head of the bed with her legs tucked under the blankets, staring at her phone. Hearing the door open, she looked up toward the entrance and asked if the blanket was too cold. Leaning against the doorframe, he asked with genuine concern if she needed an extra quilt. Sumu shook her head, assuring him that she was perfectly fine as she was. She set her phone aside and suggested they chat for a while. It was still quite early, and she found herself unable to sleep, so he naturally agreed. He closed the door and took a seat on the very edge of the bed. From the other side, Sumu noticed his bare feet, which were missing their socks. She pointed out that even with cloth slippers, his feet would surely get cold soon. She invited him to climb in and share the blanket so they could both stay warm. He hesitated, asking if it was really okay, but she reminded him it was his bed anyway. He lifted the blanket and tucked his feet in, and we see the two of them sitting at opposite ends of the bed. The folds of the heavy blanket clearly traced the slender, delicate outline of her legs. She then asked him if he had made any plans for the future or what he wanted to do. Sumu tilted her head slightly to one side as she waited for his answer. He spoke with a serene expression on his face, looking quite at peace with himself. He explained that he had no special plans, only wanting to work hard on his university entrance exams to get into a good school. His goal was to work and study simultaneously, and after graduation, find a job and keep busy every single day. He admitted that he would also like to live through some truly incredible experiences, but in the end, he was certain he would choose stability over everything else. Sumu remarked that it sounded very monotonous, and then asked when he planned to look for a girlfriend. He replied that it would likely be very late, at least until he managed to stabilize his own life. With his way of speaking and such a bland personality, he was sure no girl would ever notice him. Sumu wondered why he had so little confidence, reminding him that he possessed many good qualities. He questioned how girls could possibly like him, insisting that any virtues he had were quite unimportant. He claimed to have a normal IQ, but an emotional intelligence below zero, and on top of that, he was poor. With a bitter smile, he said he was very self-aware, viewing this not as self-criticism, but as simple reality. Sumu replied in a low voice, repeating that his qualities were far from unimportant. She told him that he was very strong, hardworking, and stubborn, traits that clearly mattered to her. With a gentle smile, Sumu calmly explained that this was indeed the case. After all, if she hated him, how could she possibly be such a good friend to him? And there it was, friends. It was then he realized he had completely misinterpreted the situation. Sumu still felt nothing but pure friendship for him, yet he, because of that one ordinary sentence, had let his imagination run so wild that he had lost control of his thoughts in an instant. Sumu watched his confusion with a smile, her joy so irrepressible that she felt like teasing him even more. "Chunyu, do you like me?" she asked, her playful eyes meeting his. He lowered his head and finally let out everything he had been holding inside. He confessed that he liked her, that she was beautiful and had such a wonderful character. And since she always looked after him, of course he liked her. How could he not? He tried to hide his face, desperate to keep Sumu from seeing how red his ears had turned. Deep down, he knew very well that his "I like you" meant something entirely different from hers. Even if she wasn't thinking about romance, he found it impossible to pretend to be calm. "Oh really? So you like me too?" she teased, her voice light. At that, Sumu's smile grew even wider, clearly enjoying his discomfort. "Is that why you were always stealing glances at me? You even touched my face today." He began to stammer that it wasn't what it seemed, trying to offer an apology. But Sumu interrupted him, her smile intensifying as she told him she wasn't angry at all. Suddenly, she thought to herself that being a bit of a bad girl wasn't such a bad thing. This nervous, clumsy boy was simply too much for her to resist teasing. He was just too adorable. However, she reminded him he still hadn't answered her other question. "Chinyu, how do I look in your eyes?" she asked, prompting him to look up. And so, we see him meeting Sumu's soft, laughing gaze once again. With total sincerity, he told her she was the most beautiful girl in school, a fact everyone had known for 3 years. He noted she was always in the top 5 in grades, kind, and incredibly easy to get along with. "To me," he concluded, "you are my classmate, you're my desk mate." He added that she was also a very good friend, admitting that he clearly had a very high opinion of her. "It's no wonder you like me then," she replied, intentionally emphasizing that specific word, like. He couldn't deny it, though to him, it still sounded like the simple recognition between two friends. And yet, despite himself, he couldn't stop his mind from wandering toward the idea of romantic love. That admission felt almost like a confession, but in his nervousness, he could only manage a silent nod. "It's getting late, I should go to sleep," he said, desperately searching for any excuse to escape. But then she asked why he didn't just sleep there, offering him the other side of the bed without a care. She suggested they keep talking, but he stammered that it wasn't appropriate since, well, she was a girl. She told him that if she didn't have a problem with it, he shouldn't be so prudish, or he'd start losing points. Sumu watched him intently, her eyes fixed on his every tiny gesture and fleeting expression. His shyness, his hesitation, and his obvious embarrassment, it all seemed to stir a certain greedy desire within her. As that feeling began to grow, he finally relented, asking her if she was ready to sleep as well. "I'm turning off the light," he announced, and she gave a soft, quiet murmur of agreement. The darkness quickly swallowed the room, leaving only the snow-white moonlight to fall across Somu's face like a misty veil. She looked incomparably beautiful, and noticing him tucked under the sheets, she playfully asked if he liked the view. Those furtive glances he kept sliding toward her face certainly didn't escape her notice. She even offered to sit up so he could get a better look at her for a while longer. He quickly declined, telling her it was too cold and that she should really get some sleep. He pulled the blanket completely over his head, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it might jump out of his chest. A few minutes later, we see him lift a small corner of the blanket, only to find that Sumu had already drifted off. Without even realizing it, Chunyu began to shift his legs to find a more comfortable position, but he accidentally brushed against another pair of feet under the covers. He pulled his foot back instantly, as if he had just received an electric shock. "Chunyu, your feet are so cold," Sumu's soft voice whispered through the darkness. She seemed to think nothing of the contact, but that casual remark sent his already racing heart into a complete flutter. He had no idea how to react, and in his confusion, he could only manage a mindless, muffled grunt. The night gradually fell into a deep silence as even the sound of the rain outside ceased completely. The world beyond the window remained a blur, distorted by the lingering droplets on the glass. Tucked away in the warm blankets, Sumu noticed that the air around her was filled with his scent. A sudden impulse began to stir within her, a restless desire that started to rise without restraint. To be honest, she couldn't help herself as she began to trace the lines of her own body. In a state of hazy intoxication, her warm feet began to wander gently beneath the sheets. She was trying to provoke another accidental touch, just like the one from moments before. She knew that for the boy who liked her, this was a wicked and rather immodest sort of teasing. But that didn't seem to matter anymore. However, the contact she was waiting for never came. Sumu sat up and, by the moonlight, saw his legs curled up on the far side of the bed like a frightened little animal. At that moment, the urge inside her became even more overwhelming, as if it were urging her to simply seize that sweetness. She felt like devouring a great feast, and that slight movement of hers caused him to jump. The truth was, he hadn't been sleeping either. He glanced toward the center of the bed and saw Sumu sitting there, watching him. "What's wrong? Can't you sleep?" he asked in a low voice, rubbing his eyes as if he had just woken up. I'm going to the bathroom," Sumu said, as she climbed out of bed and slipped on her sandals. She moved toward him in the darkness, prompting him to ask, "Aren't you going to turn on the light?" He asked this with his eyes still closed, carefully maintaining his sleeping posture. "No need, I can see fine," she replied, though in reality, she simply didn't want him to see her face. She was certain that, at this very moment, her expression was filled with quite unmentionable desires. In the small room, his scent felt strangely ethereal, stirring up thoughts that were becoming increasingly bold. As those feelings intensified, she reached the door and placed her hand firmly on the handle. But she didn't turn it. Instead, after a few silent seconds, she slowly turned her head back. Standing there by the bed, she looked down at him from above. The sound of the door opening that he was expecting never actually came. Curious, he opened his eyes and saw Sumu sitting right there on the edge of the bed. She was staring at him, her incredibly beautiful face a soft blur in the deep shadows of the room. "What is it? Weren't you going to the bathroom?" he asked, but Sumu offered no reply. She reached out and gently caressed his face, though he could see a flicker of nervousness in her eyes. Suddenly, she decided she didn't want to be a coward anymore. She wondered what kind of interesting reaction such an obedient boy would have to her next move. Sumu moistened her dry lips and, leaning in, pinched his cheek with an incredibly seductive tone. In a slow, lingering drawl, she whispered, "Now we're even. Can I make a reservation for next time?" she teased. "You can pinch me somewhere else. Stop joking around, it's very late." "Sleep well," he replied, trying to regain his composure. "Didn't you have to go to the bathroom?" he asked, to which she simply replied, "Then I'm going." Sumu puffed out her cheeks, clearly a bit dissatisfied with his rejection. Her annoyed expression was actually quite adorable. She reached the bathroom, closed the glass door, and locked it. Once inside, she leaned against the wall and curled up into a crouch. She couldn't contain herself anymore. She kept remembering the sensation of his touch and that clean, sunny scent of his. In that atmosphere, as if she were drowning in the sweet aroma of wine, the bright moonlight began to filter in. It illuminated her figure, casting an elegant shadow on the wall, while her long, messy hair fell behind her neck. A few stray strands, damp with beads of sweat, clung stubbornly to her cheeks. A deep blush had completely covered her delicate face. The thick night acted like a curtain, hiding half of her body as it remained submerged in the darkness. Every little noise felt sharp. She could hear the echo of her own breath in her ears, cold and ragged. Chinyu, she whispered his name softly, for no apparent reason at all. In her mind, his clean and handsome image resonated, so gentle and so incredibly clear. She knew that even a casual, intentional touch from her could easily awaken his shyness. Driven by a sudden desire to possess him, she stood up, went to the window, and pushed it open. The night air after the rain carried a fresh, cooling scent that filled the small space. She waited there until the longing in her eyes finally calmed down before returning to the bedroom. she returned to find a peaceful scene. Chinyu had already fallen asleep, his curled-up legs finally relaxing a bit. His breathing was soft and steady, the picture of perfect innocence. Suddenly, Sumo felt like making a little bet, a bet on which of them would wake up first the next morning. She wondered if she would believe his explanation. While lost in thought, she had already lain down right in front of him. His sleeping face, which still held a touch of boyish charm, was right there before her eyes. Chinyu, Chinyu, she whispered his name softly, convinced that he was deep enough in his slumber. Carefully, she pulled him into an embrace, feeling his steady breath brush against her delicate collarbone. Sumu was quite tall for a girl, but compared to a man like him, her figure was still remarkably petite. She knew she couldn't make any sudden movements that might wake him up, and so, the embrace felt a bit forced, a delicate balancing act of affection and caution. She tried to steady the frantic beating of her heart within her chest. She grew bolder, holding him tighter and tighter, feeling with her whole body this person she so deeply admired and loved. Sumo thought that dying in his arms like this wouldn't be so bad, to finally have him all to herself. To simply melt away into the infinite darkness. To her, that seemed like a perfectly satisfactory ending. But she wondered how she could be so selfish when he trusted her so much, even as she secretly wished to pull him into her own abyss. She had this dark urge to keep him a prisoner forever at the very bottom of that void. She felt a pang of guilt, telling herself she shouldn't think that way, yet she couldn't bear the thought of him falling for anyone else. In her mind, he belonged to her, and she felt that if he ever dared to betray her, she would simply consume him. As it turned out, Sumo woke up first. To her, watching his peaceful face while he slept was a truly pleasant way to start the day. She imagined a future where they could share a bed openly, without the need for these secret, midnight maneuvers. It was almost a shame she couldn't see his nervousness and anxiety if he were the one to wake up first. Sumu realized she was starting to enjoy this, the secret actions and the thrill of potentially being caught by him. After all, he is the one she loves. Occasionally, she wonders if confessing first would allow her to openly ask for what she wants. She even considered, perhaps, tasting a sweetness that would reach the very marrow of her bones. But her reason always held her back at the very last moment. She told herself her love for him must be so intense that it could overcome everything. She wanted to break the ties that limited her and finally declare her love on her own initiative. She knew she wouldn't feel satisfied or at peace otherwise, just as the morning light began to spread across his face. The thought of taking one last risk flickered through her mind. Sumu leaned in, and her pink lips softly brushed against his. When Shunyu finally woke up, he found himself completely alone in the room. The lingering exhaustion of Sunday urged him to stay in bed and sleep just a little longer. But he couldn't let a guest see him looking so disheveled, especially not the girl he liked. And so, he dragged himself out of bed and stepped out of the room. On the table sat a steaming bowl of rice porridge and a few buns. Sumu was sitting by the window, staring absent-mindedly at the leaves drifting by outside. "Chinyu, you're awake," she said, turning toward him with a natural, pure smile on her face. "I was just about to call you. Eat quickly. If the food gets cold, it won't be any good." He thanked her, feeling a bit awkward that the host was being looked after by the guest. He felt quite incompetent, but she told him not to overthink it, as she didn't mind at all. He gave a small nod and sat down to begin his breakfast. Sumu turned her head back, returning to her contemplation of the bleak and somber winter landscape outside. Last night's rain had left puddles scattered all across the ground. The sky had been washed clean, appearing blue and clear. She took out her phone, scrolled for a moment, and looked at the photo of Chun-Yu's sleeping face in her hidden album, along with the image of her kissing him while he slept, a secret moment just for her. She couldn't help but smile. Meanwhile, in a distant office, a woman was holding a file. "Miss Lin, here is the data on the boy you requested." Thank you." Lin Bankin opened the report on the table that contained all of Chun-Yu's information, and she couldn't help but remember that cold winter when he had first left prison. He had been such an innocent and adorable child back then, as pure as the falling snowflakes. But later, just like her, he suffered the torments of fate, leaving deep scars upon his heart. The difference was that suffering had bred hatred and ferocity in him, sowing the seeds of selfishness in his soul. He had become violent and cold, capable of killing his enemies and snatching away whatever he loved. She flipped through the pages again and again until Sumu's name appeared before Lin Bankin's eyes. The very last page of the file contained Sumu's information, accompanied by a photograph. Her beauty was certainly not inferior to his, though her eyes seemed to hide something as dangerous as a venomous snake. Deep down, she felt that if she didn't reclaim what was hers, someone else might get there first. Then, get some rest early. If you fall asleep during morning lecture tomorrow, I won't cover for you with the professor. All right, I'm logging off then. Good night, good night. No new messages arrived in the chat window after that. He reviewed the history, where dozens of seemingly meaningless conversations hid the subtle ambiguity of youth. To be honest, chatting with Sumo before bed always made him feel incredibly happy. She had applied her makeup with a touch of hope, and, of course, she hadn't left. She looked more radiant than ever, like a fragrant rose in full bloom. "Good night, Chinyu. Your sister is back. Aren't you asleep yet?" Lin Bankin smiled at him tenderly, maintaining that same kind and gentle expression she always wore. I was just about to sleep. Sister Bankin, why are you back so late? I just finished work, and as soon as I was done, I couldn't wait to get back here. Come here, let your sister give you a hug. It's been days since I last saw you. Did you miss me? Lin Bankin hugged him impulsively, resting her chin on his shoulder. She breathed in the clean, sunny scent of his body, seemingly unwilling to let go for a long time. Of course I missed you, but Sister Bankin, you're squeezing me a bit too hard. I'm sorry, your sister just got a little carried away. Lin Bankin finally let him go and gently stroked his head. Your sister will be sad, she said, touching his forehead with a slightly resentful tone. It's fine, but the lights in my house are still on. Your sister will turn them off. Go to sleep, Shinyu. It seemed useless to resist, so he resigned himself and entered Lin Bankin's room. The space was tidy and clean, a wardrobe, a desk, a double bed, with no superfluous decorations or traces of a typical girl's room. It was simple and mature. He sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, and soon the door opened. Lin Bankin took off her coat naturally, turned on the heater, and asked him in a low voice. What's wrong? Aren't you sleeping? Aren't you tired? Be careful, or you won't wake up tomorrow. Sister Bankin, are you sleeping here too? Chunyu voiced his inner doubt, noticing that Lin Bankin's natural movements gave no sign that she intended to sleep in another room. And of course, the other room didn't even have a bed made, so how could she, really? That isn't right for you, Sister Bankin, he told her, feeling the awkwardness of the situation. Deciding it was best to leave, he stood up and said he would simply go back to his own room to sleep. But just as he was about to step away, Lin Bankin lunged toward him on the bed, pinning him down. Her movements were firm and left no room for resistance, yet her face remained perfectly kind and gentle. I already told you, you cannot refuse your sister, she insisted softly. Shinyu, do you really want to see your sister sad? This isn't appropriate, Sister Bankin, he replied, trying to maintain some sense of boundaries. He reminded her that he was almost an adult now and no longer a small child. And what does that matter? It's only sleeping together, she countered playfully. She promised they wouldn't do anything else, adding that Shinyu's own room was far too cold. She claimed she didn't want him to freeze, even though he knew his own quilt was thick enough to keep him warm. If you refuse me again, your sister is going to cry, she threatened. A faint hint of a sob entered Lin Bankin's voice, making her sound soft, vulnerable, and quite pitiful. She caressed his face, but there was a certain quality in her touch that suggested the matter was not up for debate. Fine, we'll sleep together, he finally agreed after a few seconds of hesitation. In Lin Bankin's eyes, it seemed as though he were still that same naive and innocent little boy she had always known. She spoke to him as if she were comforting a distressed child who needed her protection. She seemed entirely carefree, without a single worry or a hint of being on her guard. He lay down on the bed and covered himself with the quilt, making sure to leave as much space as possible. That natural shyness around the opposite sex made him keep his distance, even though they were already sharing the same bed. We see him steal a quick glance at the woman, who was standing by the bedside with her back turned to him. And then, quite suddenly, he saw Lin Bankin begin to undo a button. Deep down, he panicked, reminding her that he was still right there and asking what on earth she was doing. She simply asked if he expected her to change into her pajamas elsewhere, noting it was fine if he saw something. Lin Bankin spoke with complete indifference, claiming that, as his sister, she didn't mind at all. He quickly shut his eyes tight and tucked his head deep under the safety of the quilt. From inside his hiding spot, he heard movement and felt someone drawing closer to him. Opening his eyes slowly, he found Lin Bankin, now in her pajamas, lying on her side right in front of him. She looked him straight in the eye and playfully asked if he had been sneaking a peek. She was smiling with a sweet, joyful expression, her tone light and full of mischief. He admitted to seeing a little, but felt she was far too close, considering he'd given up most of the bed. But Lin Bankin didn't stay on her side. She kept moving closer, as if she were approaching him on purpose. She fixed her gaze on him, her dark eyes appearing remarkably clear and bright in the dim light. There was a soul-stirring charm in her look, a hint of seduction that seemed almost legendary in its intensity. She teased him, asking if he was truly that disciplined or if she simply wasn't attractive enough for him. Her voice was honey-sweet as she continued to mock the poor young man. He was, after all, 5 years younger than her, and he quickly stammered that her beauty wasn't the issue. He told her quite honestly that she was very beautiful and, indeed, very attractive. He explained that it wasn't a lack of interest, but simply that he felt too embarrassed to be caught sneaking a look. Lin Bankin reminded him that she had already said it was fine, and that Shinyu could look all he wanted. She then teased him, wondering if perhaps there was another girl he liked, which was why he wouldn't look at his sister. His heart seemed to stop for a second as he timidly met Lin Bankin's gaze. She was always so good to him, acting as if she could understand and care for every single part of his life. She seemed to see right through to those thoughts he never dared to utter out loud. He hesitated, wondering if he should actually tell her the truth or keep it to himself. As he nodded in a daze, the soft smile on Lin Bankin's face vanished for a fleeting instant. A sudden flash of hidden intensity flickered in the corner of her eyes, something she could barely contain. However, she quickly regained her composure and asked him, with forced cheerfulness, about the girl. He was thinking of the girl he had seen last time, and to be honest, he didn't even notice Lin Bankin's brief lapse. He finally admitted it, though she reminded him that the last time she asked, he had said no. She called Shinyu a bad boy for lying, noting that back then, he didn't seem to realize how much he liked her. When she asked if the girl liked him back, he could only answer that he didn't really know. Many of her actions suggested he was special to her, but deep down, he simply didn't dare to think of it as love. She reminded him that when he was little, he used to say he loved his sister and wanted to be with her forever. She joked that Shunyu had a fickle heart, a comment that immediately silenced the poor young man. We all know children speak without limits, but he was beginning to understand the weight of standing by one's words. He didn't want to deny the impulsive promises of his youth, yet he had no idea how to respond now. Seeing his struggle, she relented, telling him she was only joking and that he shouldn't take it so seriously. She sighed, remarking that his sister was getting old and that Shinyu naturally preferred those who were young and beautiful. It was only natural, she supposed, for a young man to be drawn to girls his own age. He immediately protested, insisting that Sister Bankin was in the very prime of her life. She laughed, noting he was even more handsome than before and certainly had a very sweet way with words. Lin Bankin gently stroked his head, observing how much his features had matured over the years. She couldn't help but notice his shyness and the way he always tried to maintain a respectful distance between them. One has to grow up and become sensible, as the saying goes, though it isn't always easy. This led him to a question that had been weighing on him. Why did Sister Bankin take such good care of him? To be honest, he felt a bit ashamed to simply accept all her kindness without understanding why. Wondering why his uncle had mentioned it before, Lin Bankin looked out at the night sky, where brilliant stars adorned the darkness.